Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
It was the Monday before Thanksgiving when my phone lit up with a message that, at first glance, looked innocent, almost kind. Hey, sweetie, just thinking maybe it's best you don't come this year. Too much going on. Hope you understand. That was it. No call. No explanation. No warmth. Just a polite little nudge to stay the hell away from my own family's holiday table. And I wish I could say I was surprised. I really do. But instead, I stared at that text for a solid 5 minutes, not sure if I should laugh, cry, or throw my phone across the room. My first instinct was confusion. Had I missed something? Did I say something wrong? Had I forgotten a birthday or crossed a line I didn't know existed? Because that text was the kind of message people send when they're trying to pretend they're doing you a favor, like they're easing you out of the picture with kid gloves and a smile they don't mean. It stank of something. But I wasn't sure what just yet. I didn't answer. I just reread it, twice, 3 times. And then I remembered something that made my jaw tighten. For the past 6 years, yes, 6 full years, I'd been quietly, dutifully covering half the mortgage on their house. Not loudly, not as some kind of favor I held over their heads. I just did it. Because they needed help. Because they asked. Because family was supposed to take care of each other. And they'd come to me hat in hand, desperate, emotional, after my dad's first surgery didn't go so well and the insurance barely covered anything. They didn't say it outright, but the implication was clear. Without my help, they might lose the house. And losing the house meant losing my dad's dignity. At least, that's what my mom said. So I helped. Month after month. Year after year. Quietly. I never threw it in anyone's face. I didn't skip birthdays or guilt trip them on Christmas morning. I didn't even tell my brother, Mark, because back then, I figured he'd be hurt he couldn't help too. I told myself I was doing the right thing. The adult thing. The daughter thing. And now, after all that, this was how they handled me? A 6-line text that might as well have said, "We'd rather not deal with you this year." I wasn't angry right away, but when it hit like a freight train. I paced the kitchen for maybe 20 minutes, coffee going cold in my hand, muttering to myself like some unhinged soap opera character. Too much going on? What the hell does that even mean? Too much turkey? Too many pies? Too much pretending we like each other for 2 hours over mashed potatoes? I kept hearing my mom's voice in my head from the last time we spoke in person, which was, by the way, 9 months ago. You're always so direct. Maybe try being more graceful? As if honesty was a character flaw she'd spent years trying to smooth out like a wrinkle in her perfect little linen napkin set. But this wasn't about grace. This was about control. It always had been. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. I scrolled through the monthly transfers labeled Family Home like some cruel little joke. 12 payments a year, for 6 years. 72 clean hits to my savings account. And for what? A text message telling me to stay away? A seat at the table that apparently didn't have my name on it this year? Here's the thing, when you make sacrifices, real ones, you start to hope, naively, that someone notices. That someone says, "Hey, I see you doing all this for us. Thank you." But they never did. Not once. They just let it happen. Like it was normal. Like I owed them something just for being born. And what made my blood boil was the realization that they never even asked me not to come with regret or pain. No, they asked like they were doing me a damn favor. Like cutting me out was some kind of gift. They sent that message the way you send a heads up about a road closure. No emotion, no ownership, just bureaucracy. So I sat there in front of the glowing screen, heart pounding louder than it should have been, and for the first time in 6 years, I opened the mortgage app where my name sat quietly next to theirs. You'd be surprised how many grown adults still have their kids' names on their property. It's not romantic. It's not sweet. It's just messy. I scrolled past due dates, interest rates, a payment schedule that extended like a digital noose. And I hovered over one button I'd never dared touch before. Suspend autopay. It asked if I was sure. like some ghost of Christmas past trying to guilt-trip me back into good behavior. I clicked yes. Then I sat back and exhaled, slowly, like I hadn't in years. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about recognition. If they didn't want me there for Thanksgiving, they didn't need my money either. Simple as that. My presence came with a price they clearly didn't want to pay. So maybe my payments didn't need to show up either. I refreshed the page and watched the little green checkmark disappear. It was a small thing. Just pixels, really. But it felt like cutting a rope I'd been dragging behind me for too damn long. And then I opened another tab. Bank history. All my transfers, clear as day. 1,000 here. 1,000 there. Thousands and thousands of dollars over the years, slipping through my fingers like water while I budgeted groceries and skipped vacations. I used to tell myself it was worth it. That family mattered more than comfort. But now? I wasn't so sure. Let's see how they handle life without my name on the check. It's funny how easy it is to become invisible to your own family, even while you're keeping their roof from collapsing on top of them. The morning after I canceled the payment, I woke up earlier than usual, like my body knew something had shifted, like it was bracing for some kind of fallout. I poured myself a coffee, strong and bitter, the way my dad used to make it when he still had opinions that didn't come through my mom's voice box. And then I sat down and did something I probably should have done years ago. I called the bank. Now, let me be clear about something. I'm not one of those people who enjoys the chaos of finance. I don't get off on interest rates or amortization tables. But when you've been quietly contributing to a mortgage for 6 years without so much as a thank you card, you start to feel like maybe, just maybe, you should know what your name is really attached to. So I gave them my cosigner ID, confirmed my social, and waited on hold while some perky woman named Rachel retrieved the documents. Her voice was pleasant, almost cheerful, which made me want to scream, but I held it in. I'd had enough screaming inside my own head lately. She came back after a minute. Yes, I see here that you've been listed as a co-borrower on this mortgage since. Looks like March of 2015. You've been making regular payments through your linked checking account. Looks like about $1,000 a month. And just like that, hearing the numbers out loud, I felt sick. That was $12,000 a year. Over 7 years. That's $84,000, or at least it would have been if I hadn't missed a couple months back when I had to replace my car. But still, 70+ grand into a house that wasn't even mine? I'd never done the math out loud before. And the more I sat there, the more ridiculous it sounded. I've sent them something like $400 every 2 weeks for 7 years. That's gotta be, what, like $21,000 total? Give or take. I said it to Rachel like I believed it, because part of me didn't want to face the real number. Not yet. Because facing it would mean facing how much of my life I'd flushed down the drain in the name of being a good daughter. I heard Rachel pause longer than she needed to, and I could almost feel her doing the mental calculation, but she said nothing. Just silence, like a little space carved out for me to get honest with myself. I'd like to stop contributing moving forward, I said, voice firm, more certain than I felt. I'm no longer in a position to support this financially. That was a lie, of course. I was in a position to support it. But I was finally choosing not to. That's different. That's power. Rachel confirmed the change. Just to be clear, we'll be notifying the primary borrowers that your portion of the payment has been suspended. They may see a balance due next cycle unless they cover the full amount. Let them see it, I said, probably a little too quickly. It wasn't just about the money, though. It never is, not really. The money was just the tool my parents used to keep me tethered. The guilt? That was the engine. Every time my mom cried about dad's cholesterol or the rising cost of meds, every time she said, well, your brother's not in a place to help right now, I felt like I was signing a blood contract. And I was too scared to ask what would happen if I said no. They never said it directly, but the threat was always there, floating in the air like gas. You couldn't see it, but it could suffocate you just the same. I remember once, when I asked if Mark might contribute a little, just $100 a month or so, my mom actually sighed and said, honey, Mark's still figuring himself out. He's going through a rough patch. At the time, Mark was 30. The rough patch had lasted longer than my college degree. But I didn't push. I never did. Because I was the responsible one, the one who didn't cause drama. Which is ironic, because now I was the storm. A few days went by in silence. No texts, no calls. I half expected my mom to sense the disruption in the force and show up at my door with a casserole and 1,000 loaded questions, but nothing happened. It was eerie. Like I'd sent a bomb into their house and didn't know when it would go off. Then, a week later, I got the voicemail. "Hey, just wanted to check in. Your dad and I noticed something weird with the mortgage this month. There's a part missing. Could you give us a call when you get a sec?" No rush. We just want to make sure everything's okay. There it was. The fake sweet voice, the casual concern, the motherly "we're just checking" in tone she always used when she was trying to sound loving but was really about to guilt-trip me into submission. I could almost hear her lips curling into that half-smile she wore when she was pretending to be humble while asking for something. But this time, I didn't call back. I let the voicemail sit, untouched. Let her words hang in the air, unanswered. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something that wasn't guilt. It wasn't joy either. It was something quieter, heavier, but cleaner, like silence after a thunderstorm. I'd spent years tying my worth to being needed. Now, maybe I'd figure out who I was when no one needed me at all. It was a Thursday when my phone buzzed again, and I nearly didn't look because I'd finally gotten into the groove of ignoring them, muting every family thread, refusing to pick up calls that smelled of guilt, and telling myself over and over that I owed them nothing anymore. But this time it wasn't Mom or Dad, it was Mark. A simple, confused little text that landed with the weight of a hammer right in the center of my chest. "Hey, what's going on? Mom said something's wrong with the bank stuff." That was it. Just that. No context, no confrontation, just the kind of dumbfounded confusion you only get from someone who's been kept in the dark for far too long. Mark still lives at home. 31 years old, 2 community college dropouts under his belt, works part-time at a vape shop in town and plays Fortnite like it's an Olympic sport. And somehow, I always got the sense he was their golden retriever of a child. Loyal, simple, and easy to forgive. No one asked him for anything, and in return, he never asked much from anyone. When I got that message, I knew exactly what had happened. The house had started cracking. Not physically yet, but the signs were there. The Wi-Fi probably went out first. I could picture it. Mom getting up to refresh her iPad, finding out nothing loaded, calling the provider only to be told the autopay bounced. That's when the lies start to collapse, when the conveniences stop working. So I just stared at Mark's message for a while, weighing my options. I could lie, play dumb, act like I had no idea what he was talking about. But I was done lying for them. Done holding the fragile little porcelain teacup of our family together with both hands while everyone else just sipped without ever noticing the cracks. So I wrote him back. I kept it short. "They didn't tell you? I've been paying half the mortgage since 2015. I stopped last month. Figured it was time they stood on their own feet." I attached a screenshot, just one. It showed 6 years of deposits, all titled the same way, Family Home. I didn't want to overwhelm him. I wanted the truth to hit, and I wanted it to sting. He didn't answer. Not that day. Not the next. Not the one after that either. 3 days of silence from my own brother. And honestly, I wasn't even angry. I was exhausted. Exhausted by how long I'd carried the weight of their expectations. Exhausted by how much of my own life I'd quietly sacrificed while they sold him a fantasy that everything was fine. That the house was paid off. That we were fortunate. I couldn't decide what was worse, the fact that they lied to him, or the fact that he believed it without question. And while I waited for Mark's reply, I started remembering things I'd forced myself to forget, because that's what you do when you're trying to keep peace in a family built on quiet war. I thought about Christmas 2 years ago, when I flew in early to help prep dinner and clean the house. I remember standing over the sink, elbow deep in dishes, when my mom leaned in and whispered, "Let the men relax, honey. You've always been the capable one." And she smiled like that was a compliment. I was elbow-deep in soap scum while my brother and dad lounged on the couch watching football and farting into the upholstery, and I was supposed to be flattered because I was the smart one. Not smart enough to be equal. Just smart enough to serve without complaint. Even then, I felt something die in me. Something small and vital. But I pushed it down because that's what daughters do when their love isn't enough to change anything. On the third night, Mark finally responded. "You're not gonna like this, but there's something you need to know about the house." That was it. And suddenly the air in the room got heavier, thicker, like the pressure before a storm. I reread the message again and again, trying to squeeze meaning out of every word. Something I needed to know about the house? What could be worse than paying into a place for 6 years only to be told to stay away from it? What could be worse than finding out your loyalty had an expiration date? I didn't reply. Not right away. I just sat there, staring at the message, my stomach twisting like it used to in middle school right before a math test I hadn't studied for. Something was coming, and I could feel it in my bones. It wasn't going to be good. It wasn't going to be fair. And worst of all, it wasn't going to be surprising. Because when you grow up in a family like mine, you learn early that people only tell the truth when they run out of lies. And the Wi-Fi going down? That was just the beginning. When Mark finally told me the truth, I was sitting in the parking lot outside a dry cleaner, staring at the plastic-wrapped suits in my trunk that I didn't even wear anymore, and suddenly nothing in my life felt like it belonged to me. Not my clothes, not my memories, not even the past 6 years I'd spent quietly bailing out a sinking ship I didn't know had already been sold to someone else. He called me, voice low like he was ashamed to be saying it out loud, and said he found the paperwork stuffed in the back of the file cabinet in Dad's office, the one no one was allowed to touch except Mom when she needed to feel important. Mark had been looking for a misplaced tax form when he found a manila envelope labeled with his full name and the date, February of the previous year. Inside was a copy of the property deed. The house, the one I'd been paying half the mortgage on for over 6 years, had been legally transferred into his name alone. Not mine. Not jointly. Just his. No note. No explanation. No conversation. They'd signed it over to him quietly, like passing a torch in the middle of the night and hoping no one noticed the fire had changed hands. He said they told him the transfer was a future investment, that it made sense since he was going to stay close to home, while I was always off living your independent life. They said I didn't need the house, that I was doing just fine. The rage that filled my chest didn't come fast. It came slow and hot, like water just starting to boil. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just sat there in the car, both hands gripping the steering wheel, the world suddenly narrowing into a single, sharp line. They had never planned for me to have anything. They'd used me like a paycheck with a pulse, and when they'd secured the asset under my brother's name, they sent me a polite little text asking me to sit this one out. I asked Mark why he didn't say anything earlier, and he hesitated. Said he didn't know what to do. Said he didn't want to upset Mom. That it didn't feel like it was his place to question the people who still cooked his meals and paid the Wi-Fi, well, when the Wi-Fi worked, anyway. I told him the truth, that I didn't blame him. Not fully. He'd been kept in the dark, too. Fed the same polite lies I'd been fed for years, just flavored differently. But something snapped inside me after that call. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't heartbroken or confused or hoping someone would finally explain things in a way that made them make sense. I was done waiting for sense. What I wanted now was distance and control. Because if they could rewrite the paperwork, then I could erase myself from it just as easily. I spent the next week researching liability clauses, cosigner rights, legal detachment from mortgage contracts. I learned about subrogation and partial release of obligation. I wasn't planning to sue them. I didn't want a piece of the house. I didn't want to touch a single brick. I just wanted out. Off the loan. Off the hook. I didn't want my credit tethered to people who couldn't even say thank you, let alone treat me like part of the family when it didn't benefit them. I filed the motion through an attorney I knew from college, a woman who once said something that stuck with me for years. Sometimes protecting yourself means disappointing people who never really saw you anyway. That line echoed in my head like a song while we filled out the forms and submitted the request for full release of cosigner liability. She told me the process might take a few weeks. I said I didn't care. I'd waited years for this. I could wait a little longer. But apparently, they couldn't. Because 4 days after I filed, my receptionist called me over and whispered, "There's a woman in the lobby. She says she's your mother." I looked through the glass, and there she was, sitting upright in a stiff beige chair, sunglasses on indoors like a dramatic widow from a bad soap opera. She had a patent leather purse in her lap and a folded tissue clutched between her fingers like she'd rehearsed the whole scene in her head and couldn't decide whether she wanted to beg or scold. I stood there for a long moment, not moving, just watching her through the window like she was part of some museum exhibit on emotional manipulation. This was the woman who told me last year that my ambition was exhausting, who once said I always made things harder than they needed to be. Now she was here. Not calling. Not texting. Not writing a letter. She showed up like the kind of person who can't imagine a world where they don't get to control the narrative. And I could feel it in my bones. She didn't come to apologize. She came to reclaim something. But the thing she didn't know yet, maybe the thing she never really understood, is that I wasn't the same daughter she'd trained to be agreeable. I wasn't the same woman who once rearranged her own rent payments just to make sure her parents didn't fall behind. The version of me who sacrificed without being asked? She didn't live here anymore. And maybe I'd let her sit out there in the lobby for 5 minutes. Maybe 10. Because if she wanted my attention, she could wait like the rest of the world. She wanted to meet somewhere neutral, and I agreed, even though there was nothing neutral left between us, not in our words, not in our history, not in whatever threadbare idea of family we were still pretending to drag behind us like a dog on its last walk. The park she chose was one we used to visit when I was little, the kind with a wooden gazebo and benches too splintered for comfort, with duck ponds and seagulls that begged like professionals. It was the kind of place where nostalgia should have softened the edges, but instead, it just made everything sting a little deeper. I saw her from across the lot, already sitting on a bench under the shade of a tree that had probably been younger than me when we first walked here together. She had sunglasses again, of course she did, and she was holding a to-go cup like it was some kind of emotional armor. When I walked up, she looked up and smiled like nothing was broken. Like this wasn't the first time she'd sat in front of someone she'd betrayed. "You look tired," she said, in that passive-aggressive way only mothers can make sound both loving and like an accusation. I didn't reply. I just sat down beside her, far enough away that our elbows wouldn't touch. There was wind, soft and sharp, the kind that carries unfinished sentences with it. I waited for her to speak first. I wasn't going to make this easier for her. She sighed, loud enough to perform it. "We just didn't want drama this year," she finally said, like that was the root of all this. "You always ask questions. You always want things to be fair." The audacity of it almost made me laugh. I kept my hands in my lap and stared at a bird pecking at crumbs near the edge of the path. "And God forbid we have a fair daughter," I said, quiet but steady. God forbid someone noticed what was actually happening. Her mouth tightened like she'd tasted something bitter. "It wasn't about the money," she said quickly, like she was cutting off a rope before it could wrap around her throat. "It was about peace. We just needed peace." "Then you can pay for your peace," I said without hesitation, turning to meet her eyes, not caring if it cut her open a little. "Because I've paid for it long enough." She didn't cry. That was the thing about my mother, she never broke down. Not publicly. Her strength was made of ice, not steel. It cracked only in private. And I used to mistake that for grace. I used to think her silence meant dignity. Now I knew better. It just meant she was the kind of person who could lie to herself better than anyone else. "I didn't ask to be cut out of the house," I said, voice shaking not from emotion, but from restraint. But I was. I didn't ask to carry your mortgage for 6 years, but I did. I didn't ask to be the only one treated like a burden just for asking for honesty. I stood up slowly, letting the weight of each word hang in the air like smoke. You did this to yourselves. Not me. Her face cracked, just a little. I saw it in her lip, in the way her hands gripped her coffee like it was the last warm thing she had. We were scared, she said. We didn't know how to tell you. You didn't tell me because you didn't think I'd walk away, I said. You didn't think I'd ever stop showing up. But I did. I have. I walked away then. I didn't wait for her to call after me, didn't glance back to see if she was crying behind those sunglasses, didn't check to see if her coffee had spilled. I just walked. That night, I opened my bank app and clicked through the same familiar screens one last time. I canceled the final auto transfer. That monthly withdrawal that had become so routine it may as well have been rent for a life I wasn't even living. Then I opened the shared family calendar, birthdays, holidays, dinner invites that always came last minute, and with too many strings, and deleted my access. No notification. No explanation. Just gone. I wasn't going to remind them when I was available anymore. I wasn't going to leave space open for people who never actually made room for me. And the next morning, I booked a flight. First class. Window seat. No return date. Somewhere warm, somewhere unfamiliar, somewhere that didn't echo with old conversations I never got to finish. I didn't text anyone the itinerary. I didn't leave a note under the door. I just went. At the gate, as they called boarding group 1, I pulled out my phone one last time. I wasn't looking for messages. There weren't any. I wasn't hoping for apologies. They wouldn't come. I was looking for something else, something small and sharp and innocent. I found the photo easily, me at 8 years old, standing in front of that house, smiling like nothing in the world had ever disappointed me. My hair in braids, my front teeth missing, my arms holding a puppy we only kept for a year before it got too hard. Behind me, the house looked big and safe and endless. I stared at that picture until they called my row. And as I stood to board, I whispered under my breath, not to the photo, not to myself, but to the version of me who used to believe love was something you earned by giving too much. I didn't burn the bridge, I said softly, slipping the phone into my bag, stepping forward without looking back. I just stopped building it alone.